going to adjust the agenda just a little bit so that we can get our student presenters home to do homework. So, Nora?
She's on her way.
Okay.
She's nervous about the huge audience.
So we started off before vacation with the variety show. We had many students come up and show all their talents. We had the alumni panel. We had a bunch of our student alumni come in and talk about college. We had many freshmen, sophomores talk about what life is like at different schools with different majors. Haiti trip, we leave in 6 days. We leave on Sunday morning, which is very exciting. All of our sports teams are well underway. Track, I know, has a meet tomorrow. Girls had a game today. Mock exams start soon. I know AP English classes, they are coming up. We have science classes in March and math in April. Talk about connections.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I had to run in really quick there. We are working on our connections groups for our conference that's coming up March 14th. So that happens after science mock exams, which are the day before. So it's a lot going on, but we're doing a good job. I do think I talked about it a little bit last time. We have over 300 students and adults coming from all over the state of Massachusetts for the conference. So lots of colleges that are speaking there as well. So we have a good variety of things and people that are coming. We're also working on our groups with freshmen right now. We start our first lesson on Friday, which will be during 10:30 to the end of the day. So D, E, and F blocks. We're going to be working on our first, I think 2 lessons are combined to start with the freshmen. And we figured to do it this way would make the most sense versus last time, because we were in advisory and the advisory lessons were too short to get all the information that we wanted to include in one advisory period. So it makes the most sense to have class time allotted for that. But the reason we set it up how we did is so that it would only hit one class period. It only hit each class period one time, so they're not missing a ton of class. It's just this one in particular is longer because it's the first opener and stuff. So that's going on. We're also working on getting a keynote speaker for the conference as well, which is, I think, going up well. We're just still putting emails out and talking to people. It's my innovations project, so I've been working a lot on the administrative side, organizing and getting to talk to a lot of people, and I think it's a really good professional experience to work with a lot of adults. So that's about it for connections, which is a lot of stuff, but I think it's going really well. Did you talk about variety show?
Yeah. We also are doing, with the 8th graders, we're doing a little lunch group. So a bunch of our juniors go down during middle school lunch, and they talk to a couple kids, and because I know when I was an 8th grader, I was a little nervous going to high school with the big change. So we allow them the 8th graders to ask questions, and we tell them what high school is actually like versus what they're told and what they think about it.
That's about it.
That's great. Any questions? Any comments?
What are the options? Who are you looking for speakers?
Right now we're putting word out for people that have a larger social media presence. So I know we talked about, there's a woman that we started watching. We introduced her to Connections, I think, when we first started. Her name is Cheska Lee, and she started where we got our name from. So our Connections conference, our slogan is ally is a verb, because she has a video talking about if you're going to be an ally to a group of people, you need to use that as an active verb, and how participating is really important. So she was a big inspiration. Obviously she has a lot of social media presence, so we're still trying to reach out to her to see what's going on, but people like that who have a big presence in our community. And we're having a lot of people talk from colleges that work with diversity groups or things like that. So I know I have a list somewhere, but I know I think we're talking to UMass Amherst, and we have, I think, some from Worcester State that are coming, so that's good. But it's mostly the speakers are going to be adults, but the majority of the workshops, we have a lot of kids running those, like our connections kids, and I know some schools are going to be presenting as well. I made a workshop proposal form that we're sending out, or if we already did, I think we did send it out to the schools, so they'll give us feedback on what they want to talk about, and then we'll organize it, because we have a map set up of like where all of it's going to happen, like what rooms are going to be available and like what supplies we need. Like some need like a computer or a smart board, or like some would need like the gym, because it's a big room or a big space for like a big activity. So just like that's what I'm working on mostly, like organizing and administrating for things like that. So right now that's where we're at. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is the Citizens Forum. A reminder that discussion or comments regarding individuals should be avoided so as not to violate an individual's rights. A reminder, since we have a large group tonight, speakers will be allowed 3 minutes. The presiding chair may permit an extension to this time limit. Improper conduct and remarks will not be allowed. And all request that all remarks and questions be addressed to the chair. Anybody like to speak?
Chairman, board members, Superintendent Bren, Brian Johnson, 45 Barnett Road. I'm also president of the Friends of Sutton Football. We're here tonight. Obviously, there has been some activity to try and dissolve the football program at Sutton. We have concerns, as we have 25 returning athletes for varsity level football. And to date, we have not had a community forum that was actually promised to us in the letter that was issued back on November 10th. I've had communications with the Douglas administration. They have not been kept in full communication upon what all the information is that's supposedly coming out back and forth. When I talk to them, basically their updates are from the updates that I give them through district email versus communication directly with them. So that's a major concern with us, as we affect their student body as well with the decisions that we're making. We know that we're on the agenda for the football update later on. By the way the forum is conducted, there is no communication or crosstalk, if you will, around what that update will be. So this is our only opportunity to speak on that behalf. I would also like to move that maybe we move that agenda item forward, as everybody in here is interested in what that particular update is. So I mean, I've sent some emails to the board. Hopefully you've seen them. I provided you with the data that I have, and that is available through the MIA and National Federation of State High Schools, or any other organization that you look through. As you saw in some of those emails, the number of varsity athletes to compete on the field at a varsity level is 18. Again, we have 25 returning varsity players. 22 if you were in Chicago, 25 if you were in Ohio, 20 if you're in Maryland or New York. But we're here in Massachusetts, so the MIA is 18 varsity athletes. And that's if no one else comes out for the team. That's how many athletes that we have based on the numbers at the end of Thanksgiving. If you take the numbers at the beginning of the season, we would have 30 athletes returning if those athletes who dropped off during the season decided to play again. So I'm very interested into hearing the updates that have come through, what discussions and decisions have been made. And we all would implore that we have this community forum that was actually promised to us and to Douglas and Douglas's administration that has not taken place for over 2 months.
Thank you.
I I just have to make a comment on that last comment. That is categorically not true. I can tell you that. I've spoken to the superintendent of Douglas at least 6, 7 times. We've been in countless meetings. He is fully and completely aware of the situation. No ifs, ands, or buts. So I don't know where that's coming from, but I can tell you from where I sit, he was a former football coach. He's very concerned about this himself. So, I just want to make sure that facts are clear, that they have been kept informed of everything that's been happening for the last several months, from my perspective.
How you doing? Chris Gramstorff, Barnett Road, the former president of the Friends of Sutton Football. The fact that we're sitting here again a few years after we went through this the first time when the school tried to dissolve the football team it defies any comprehension or logic, and it's ridiculous. Any reason that this administration has put forward as supporting getting rid of this team, you put the 30 seconds of analysis into it, and it doesn't hold a single bit of water. It's the field, it's the permanent solution, it's the players. 2 years ago, they didn't have enough players. They have enough players. How many people are playing on the softball team this spring? It starts in a few months. None of you know. And no one's held them accountable to say, hey, we need to know how many players are playing softball a year ahead, or they're not going to have it. Why is football so different? This community in this town has spent a lot of time and effort to show and demonstrate its support for these kids in their program, to the tune of somewhere around $100,000, which, as the guy who ran Sutton football for the first 5 years, can tell you that the athletic department did a poor job of accounting for. And, we can go back and we can go over the spreadsheets and we can show you where the accounting errors and everything else went with it, but they did a poor job. I can't help but wonder if there's some other hidden agenda for getting rid of this program, because there hasn't been the appropriate amount of support for this team going back 3-4 years now. It doesn't make any sense. And if the athletic department is not going to show the leadership to support these guys, I would ask that you guys take the leadership role and demand that the school do the right thing and support these athletes. With regard to Mr. Friend's previous statement, I had a conversation early in the fall with Christina Tamala and said, hey, I heard that that you guys are looking to get a girls lacrosse team. She says, yeah, we're trying to figure out a co-op program. I thought that was great. I had a conversation with the principal from Douglas High School and said, hey, would you guys ever think about hosting a girls?
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
I just want to be mindful of regarding individuals
Okay.
and naming individuals specifically.
I had a conversation with the athletic director.
Thank you.
Same story. Had a conversation with the Douglas principal and said, would you be interested in hosting a co-op program? Because according to the athletic director, they're trying to find an opportunity for the girls to play lacrosse. He said, they had some interest in it when they did some polling previously, and they were going to check. However, the email I got back from him, and I'm quoting, there's no names, a lacrosse co-op isn't going to happen. We weren't told anything about Sutton's decision to dissolve our football co-op until they had done all the negotiations on their new co-op, and the league vote was a few days away. This is the important part. I can't go into a partnership when I don't trust the AD, the super, or the principal there right now. And frankly, neither do I. Their reasons don't hold water. I could come up with 13 different ways to work around any of the problems that they've identified in about a minute and a half, and we could have this thing solved. So 2 years ago, Ted Friend's quote.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Please.
Mr. Friend, the superintendent's quote, I figured since he was sitting here, was that as long as the players were there, they would have a program. As long as the players were there, they'd have a program. They have the players. They should have the program. They talked about a permanent solution for this team. We've already been kicked out of the Millbury Co-op. We've been kicked out of the Oxford Co-op. A co-op is not a permanent solution. And I guess in closing, what people need to understand is the lessons that these kids are learning, these athletes are learning. You know, the great thing about a football team is that any kid can play on the football team. You don't have to be the fast kid. You know, there's place for all the different student athletes. And for a school system as much as Sutton values the inclusion of everybody, shame on you for thinking about getting rid of the one team that anybody can play on, to include the girls. The last game that I had the chance to see them, it was one of the few games, I think it might have been the only game they won. They were up and they were in the final seconds and they were, you know, basically in the victory formation. And instead of the kids celebrating, Coach Cherie back there is saying, hey, remember your values. Remember what we talked about. Remember what we taught you. Remember your no, not letting the kids, you know, jump around and celebrate. You know, the lessons that they're getting out of there go way beyond this. So again, do the right thing. Hold the superintendent to his word. Don't go on made-up facts from the athletic director. And just do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Seeing no more, we'll move on to the next item. That's the consent agenda, the minutes from December 10th, the bill schedules from December 13th, December 20th, and January 3rd. Anybody that can make a motion?
So moved.
Second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Next item is the facilities update with Mr. Raymond.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Roger.
Hi, Roger.
Didn't know so many people came to listen to you talk tonight, did you?
Yeah, I didn't realize that either. Put together a bunch of just bullet items that I was gonna go over tonight. First of all, as we all know, Mr. Russell left us last spring, has moved on to retirement. Seems to be doing well, but he's actually offered to fill in as a day custodian if we need some help, so that was good to hear. In the meantime, we've hired a new person. He came on board after the start of school. His name is Dave Richards. He's been doing an excellent job. He has a lot of different types of skills, pretty much like what Robbie could do, and has helped out tremendously so far in the school system, and he's been a welcome addition to the staff. So he's a big guy when you see him. He's got a deep voice when you see him. Say hi. He's very friendly, and I think you'll like him when you do meet him. Getting on to some of the building things that we've got going on throughout the district. We've had a roof leak in the early learning building that's caused a number of ceiling tiles have to be replaced. And it was also a concern of the Board of Health. They happened to walk in there, and it was in the kitchen area and extended into the hallway right by the kitchen area in the early learning building. We found a puncture up on the roof, which now that that's got repaired has seemed to have stopped that leak. So it was a good find. That seems to be under control right now, and the Board of Health is happy with us so far. To date, the repair budget lines are okay. We're about $29,000 left for the rest of the year, and we're halfway through. So right now we're feeling we're in good shape to finish off the rest of the year. The ELC has, just to give you a quick overview of each of the buildings, the ELC has only had some minor repairs, one being that roof. The elementary is slightly over because of, and I'll get to that, about the mold issues that we had in the air quality report. A number of exhaust fans needed to be replaced, so that has put that line item, this chair seems to be sinking. That has put that line item over what we anticipated for the year. The middle and high school, we've had a couple costly repairs, a couple with the elevator and a couple with the chiller unit. We lost some compressors earlier in the year. They're tied together, so when one went, it took the other one out, so that was a little expensive to get fixed. Elevators were pretty much at the beginning of the year, and there was a couple little things. One was a door control board, and the other one was, I'm not sure what this thing does. It's called a door gib, or whatever it is. It controls the doors from going in and out, and that went bad also, but they're both repaired now. So, as you all know, we had a very humid summer, and it did cause, you know, as pretty much, I would say, I won't say 70%, but a good percentage of the schools in Massachusetts had the same problem that we went through near the end of the summer, where we were discovering mold and on the carpet, some on some furniture. Typically what happens is, you know, we clean the entire building from top to bottom. We shampoo rugs, and, you know, there's always some dampness that gets left behind by doing that process. The HVAC system ran constantly all summer, night and day, to try to keep the building cool, and that again with the warm air outside against the windows, everything else, and then all the humid weather that we got, it just added up to some old issues. Wasn't extensive. As soon as we saw it, the guys were on it, and from pretty much that day that we discovered it, we went through the classrooms that were having the problems pretty much every single morning, and just making sure we weren't seeing anything, knowing that school was starting in about a week. Let's see. Because of that, as you probably know, we were requested to have some type of testing done. So I called up the State Department Board of Health, and they've done some air quality tests in the building before, probably maybe 5-6 years ago, and then they did some on the high school building. They also did one on the elementary school years ago also. So they came in, performed the test, and that's available on the website. I think Ted has probably told you that it's available out there for everyone to see. There was probably about 30 recommendations and findings from that we had to address. So all, if not almost all of them, have been pretty much addressed now. We're continuing to monitor the rooms, but now that the weather's dried out, the heat is on, all those problems have subsided, and hopefully we're done with them. One of the things was the mold on the cold water pipes, because the cold water pipes were running constantly, and that was one of the issues. So when the guy was here, I showed him the pipes, and he goes, "Oh, okay." And he says, "Well, why don't you just replace that insulation?" I says, "Well, we can." I says, "But can you guarantee me that if we have the same conditions next year, we won't have the problem all over again?" And they said, "I cannot guarantee you that." So we cleaned them all up, and we're continuing to do what we have to do to make it all better. Also, as a result of that, we found some of the exhaust fans on the roof were either not working fully or not working. Some of the motors had gone out, and now a number of these had been replaced about 7, 8, maybe 10 years ago, and their lifespan is probably in the 7, 8 year span. So we're back to, you know, fixing some of these all over again. So that's why that budget item, as I mentioned earlier, will be a little bit over. A couple of these fans are good size, and, you know, they cost, then they weren't just like $100 fan, you know. Typically they're in the thousands of dollars. So they're almost all of them are all fixed now. And we had there's a differential pressure switch that turns on a group of the fans, which wasn't working properly. So MPC has come in and rewired that, so now with the flip of a switch, we get all the fans that come on, and they're staying on all the time now. We have 2 new boilers that have been put into the elementary building, new Baderas boilers, and they've been up and running, haven't had any problems, and seem to be working out well right now. Also, as probably everybody can contest here, the wet weather in the spring I mean, the fall has caused numerous problems with the fields and the conditions of the fields, not being able to play, and unfortunately, there's not much that we could have done to help out, other than put a big tent over the fields. There were two issues that were in the wastewater treatment plant. We brought them up earlier, probably near the end of last year. And the DEP had written us up on them we had to get them fixed. One of them was the road hatch that's in the road that runs in back of the school. That has just been finished maybe about 4 weeks ago, and that is completed now. And then there were some bulges in the filter tank that's inside the building. They welded 2 patches in place. They were on pretty much the same location on opposite sides of the tank. They're thinking it was something to do with the structures that were welded into the tank inside. How extensive it is right now, without draining the entire tank down and really washing it all down, it's really hard to tell right now. So they patched it out from the outside, put some big metal patches on it, and it's holding together really well. So they're figuring that's going to buy some time, and I'll get to that in another couple of minutes. There's also been an intermittent problem out there that probably nobody's aware of other than probably Ted and I. Has caused a number of phone calls over the weekend, and the pumps would just stop pushing water into the buildings, and it happened on, unfortunately, the Chain of Lights weekend. But we were able to get it back going again, and it looks like they have found a problem. It was a setting that got messed up somewhere. And they also are feeling that the control interface, it's a little LCD display, you can press all the buttons. That has pretty much gone sour, and it's not doing what it's supposed to do. So they're in the process of putting together a new interface for us without having to replace the entire controller section, which would save us, a substantial amount of money. So they're working on that now, and when that gets put together, they'll put that in. So right now, it's pretty much an on and off switch inside the building to keep those pumps running, but it seems to be working. We also installed a pressure reducer valve in a middle school, high school, because we've been having a lot of problems with leaking toilets and urinals, and talking to the manufacturer of the vacuum breakers that we have to replace and the actual flush valves themselves, they're thinking that the pressure going into the building was higher than what the components are actually rated for. So talked to MPC, they installed a pressure reducer valve to reduce the pressure, so we won't have that, it's kind of like a back flush of the water when it stops. The pressure pushes the water up underneath this little thing called a vacuum breaker, and it squirts the water out. It's not dirty water, it's clean water, so that's a good thing, but it still makes a mess around the toilet area, and we replaced the vacuum breaker, and within a month we have to do it again. So hopefully that seems to be, the past week or two, we've seen a reduction in the amount that we have to replace. And then the last thing that I wanted to just bring up, I don't want to alarm anybody. This is something that Ted and I have talked to Jim Smith here in the town hall, probably about 3 weeks ago, and that according to Whitewater, who manages the wastewater building, that we will probably need to make some type of decision within the next 3 to 5 years, and that bulging tank is one of the reasons. They don't know how extensive that can be inside, and unless they were to, drain everything out, which would only happen during the summertime. But there are a number of other problems that we've been having. Parts have been obsolete. We've seen a high number of failures out there, which has led to us going over budget in the wastewater plant. Pumps have died, controllers, the rotting of the tank, the cage that the membranes actually fit into. We're going to need to buy a new one this summer to keep us going, to the tune of about $20,000. So we know that the town has been talking about trying to get storage up to the town hall here. And we talked to Jim to possibly consider bringing it down to the school too, because they're estimating, we're talking probably over $1 million to probably have to do what we have to do to make the wastewater plant continue, 3 to 5 years down the line. So it's just something to be aware of, that we need to talk about it. We're feeling that with the amount of repairs that we've made the last 2 to 3 years, which have been pretty high, that a lot of the bigger items have probably been replaced, but that's not covering the structure of the actual tank and some of the other infrastructure that runs the entire plant. So we're told we have to, plan for something, whether it's bring in a new tank, which you just can't, you may have to pull a part of the roof off or a side of the building off to get this out. If we decide to put the same technology in there, and they did mention there is a newer technology which has a smaller footprint for the overall filtering system, but again, that's expensive also, so. I know it's not the best news, but at least we had some time to think about it, so. And that's about all I have at the moment.
Are we still just, last I remember, I think we were like one of 2 districts in the state that has to handle their own water.
As far as I know, there's not too many of school systems that have their own wastewater plant, yeah.
So we don't even have a lot of systems to look at, to compare to in regards to school systems.
When did that plant go in operation? What
It
year?
was around 2000 when they built the elementary school.
The other problem is, if you take out the wastewater treatment plant, then there's an issue with the water to actually run the gray water system. So it's a pretty complicated issue. But it's really a big issue that we need to keep the town involved and communicating with on a regular basis. Like Roger said, in the next 3 to 5 years, we feel confident that the system will be adequate to serve the needs of the school, but there needs to be some plans in place or beyond that.
Years ago, we dealt with making sure there was sufficient glycol in the heating systems. That's still something that you check?
Yes. Yeah, that's tested, I think it's bi-monthly. It used to be Gurney Engineering. I don't remember the name of the company right now, but they bought out Gurney, and they come in and they test for glycol in all the systems and are rust prohibitive. At some time, though, they say glycol only lasts so long, just like the antifreeze in your car. You have to change it, so sometime in the future. And I think we put that in about 5 years ago, so we're probably 4 or 5 years away from having to change that out too. But I don't find that won't be as expensive as the wastewater plant.
You had to go back to the.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Roger.
Anybody have any other questions? Thank you, Roger.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're going to adjust the agenda again, and so that you all don't have to sit around for the whole night and kids can get home, do some homework. We'll move the football update up. Mr. Friend?
So Brian had requested that we put this on the agenda so that they could come in and address as part of our policy. I don't really have much more to offer other than what went out to the parents last month. In December, the Dual Valley Conference and the Southern Worcester County Conference both unanimously voted to approve a co-op between Millbury and Sutton, including the Douglas players that are currently on the team. The football schedule takes place every 2 years in early winter. The timeline to receive cooperative agreements approved from the MIAA is early January. And so the next phase is that it goes to the MIAA, and they give a thumbs up or thumbs down. If that is approved, then it needs to go to the school committee, and the school committee then needs to make a decision whether to keep the current 2-year cooperative or go with a Millbury cooperative. If that happens, as we met, we had talked about having the meeting with Millbury. And when we thought about it, when that was discussed back in November, it's kind of premature to have a meeting with the Millbury AD, the Millbury coaches, when we did not have, we don't have an answer as to whether we're gonna be able to do a co-op or not. And so if we don't do a co-op with Millbury, then we would maintain our co-op with Douglas. So it was really kind of premature to have that meeting if, why would you have a meeting if we don't know if it's actually gonna happen or not? So that's the reason why we delayed that meeting, you know, as we thought about it. And at this point, we're just waiting for the MIAA to meet, and from there, I would say we have 2 meetings coming up. We have a January 28th meeting, which is our public hearing meeting, and then we'll have a meeting, I believe it's February 4th, first meeting of February. I would say that during those 2 meetings, one of those meetings, we'll be bringing forward to this committee our recommendation whether we go with the Millbury Sutton Douglas co-op or we maintain the current one. I think it's obvious that if we've pursued it this far from the administrative standpoint, and we'll talk about that more at the next meeting, would be to, the recommendation, if it's agreed to by MIAA, would be to have a Millbury Sutton Douglas co-op starting next fall.
Please.
So that's where we stand at this moment.
Where does the, when would the MIAA vote on that?
They do a virtual meeting, and so it's a bunch of superintendents and principals, and so they'll meet sometime in January. They schedule it.
Soon enough is January.
It's, they have to vote in January, and then the next step would be bring it to this committee.
If that gets approved, what is the time frame on that? Because I think since I've been involved, I think we were teamed up with Millbury, then it went to Oxford, and there was some regulations on that, but that's one of the things we keep concerning with is how sustainable it is.
Sure.
And, you know, we don't want to go to Millbury and find ourselves 2 years. Same thing, if we keep it within house, we don't want to be in the same position in 2 years. We want something that works best for the students, and that's, I want to make sure something's stable wherever we go to.
I agree.
Nobody's gonna kick us out in 2 years, so that's not stable.
You say you agree, but then
you.
act on it.
I'm still,
All right.
Act on the facts.
Excuse me.
I'm still interested in seeing some element of measure of numbers. I know there's been
Sure.
a lot of discussion around what numbers look like. In my mind, I'm really looking for over, since the inception, regardless of where it was, participation, beginning, end. I think that sometimes is mixed. We hear about what the numbers were, and by the different towns.
Yep.
where they were related.
I have those numbers. This was an update to the committee. I think that,
The sooner they're out, the easier it is to digest. I don't, if we can know them prior to the next meeting, that's useful.
you will have them.
Here's my concern, is I'm still fuzzy on all this. And I'm on the committee. So I would have loved to have seen Christina here.
Well, this is simply,
I know it's
The-
just an update, but this is her job. And I would have really have liked to seen her here. And that's my concern. Because I have a lot of questions still. I mean, you guys might be a little more versed in what's going on, but I'm still in the dark. That's how I feel. And that's not fair for me to make a decision if I don't feel fully informed.
first of all, I told Christina Tamala not to come tonight.
Okay.
This was a simple, this
seen.
was a simple update of what is already there.
Right, but still, that's her job. I mean, that's what I feel. And I understand, Ted, you make the decisions, I understand, but I'm just telling you how I feel.
Yep.
And you know I do.
If we were going to have a full discussion of all of the reasons, pro and con, they will be here. But we weren't gonna have that conversation here
Well,
tonight.
it's not necessarily pro and con. I want to hear how this, I'm still fuzzy on all the details of how this started. And I want to know more.
Sure.
Okay,
So-
so can we, for the next meeting, if this is going to, if we hear from the MIAA within the next couple of meetings, or within the next couple of weeks, and this makes it on to the meeting agenda for the 28th, well in advance, so probably within the next week, can we get from either you, Ted, or from the athletic director, historical numbers, a more formal timeframe of what's happened, so that everybody has the same piece of information to work from, and that they'll be in a better position to make an informed decision. I understand the passion in the room. No decisions have been made. It's not here yet. We're still trying to figure out as a committee, you know, we've heard different things as well. We're still trying to get numbers and understand that part too. I appreciate the passion. I appreciate that you're coming out to do this. Let's work together on this, but let us get some more information first, okay?
Can I recommend that if we're doing a hearing on the 28th, if it isn't.
If we hear from the MIA, we haven't,
Well, no, I'm sorry,
we
we
have
have a
the
meeting on
public
the
hearing
28th and we have a
budget.
public hearing. Unless it's time sensitive, I wouldn't try to do the public hearing and this, which I suspect will be a longer debate than usual. So you know this calendar better than the rest of us, but I would prefer that we.
so do you want to do it for the, okay.
have to be in 6 months before the first practice.
The other,
Time sensitive.
the other piece that I'd be curious about is if,
Public hearing.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to.
Yep.
If it makes sense and we are having a decision, and I hope that you can have a conversation with the superintendent, but does it make sense to invite the superintendent from the other school districts that are involved? They may not.
Okay.
Sorry, I was asking the chair to discuss whether it made sense to invite superintendents from other involved districts in the next meeting.
Or athletic directors.
For me, one of the things that I'm trying to get my head wrapped around is we hear a lot of discussion around what is the program and how much is it a program that we're offering to students if it starts with Sutton and it's on Sutton Fields versus not. I don't have a good feel for that in my head, but certainly is something that I think is worth in the next discussion being aware of.
You're gonna be too late if the schedule comes out this Friday.
Anybody else? Okay. Next item is the school safety update.
Okay. Bruce, you had asked a question about parking and
Yes.
parking on Putnam Hill Road and Boston Road. So for sporting events, for weekend events, for when there's large crowds, you're not supposed to park on Boston Road. It's a no parking zone. And also along where the buses park at the Smissel, the circle on the corner of Boston Road and Putnam Hill Road. Do you know this? What I'm talking
Yep.
about? You can't park on the school side. You can park on the other side. And we're also trying to make sure that we're gonna try to push the people that come to sporting events and band events and different events into the back parking lot of the schools. For basketball games, they'll be able to park in the back parking lot and come in the side door along Putnam Hill and enter that way, so that we prevent people from parking. So we prevent people from parking where they're not supposed to be parking.
If I'm parked the circle now, you come in off of Boston Road, the car shouldn't be near the school, it should be near where
Yes.
the plaque is?
Yes, yes.
Sorry.
Yep. And I think the reality is that people are naturally going to park there once they get going, especially if there are not police there to control traffic.
And when you see the visiting team bus parked on the inside by the school, it's almost like a magnet for at least people from out of
Sure.
town to park there.
Right.
And
People are going to park. The AD purchased 12 movable no parking signs to be utilized for different traffic patterns. Really, especially when we have cross-country meets down on by Shaw Farm, people are parking along the road, so we're putting up those no parking signs there. Again, I think I covered that. The custodial staff has received their uniform shirts. They look very dashing in their uniform shirts.
I was told to wear it, I'm sorry.
Oh, did you wear it, Rod? Did you wear it? Okay. You did. So, actually, it does make a difference. So, there's a uniformed appearance. People, when they come in, if they're in there for the weekend, they can look and see that the person works for the school. So it makes a lot of sense. Alice training, the Alice lockdown, informed content, counter evacuate plan has been conducted. All staff have been trained. One of the areas that we found a weakness of this was subs, when subs come in. Yeah. So, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to, you got to leave it open a little bit.
It's got to be open a little.
Yeah, just, so at the beginning of the year, what we're gonna do is invite our regular subs in so that they're also trained, the people that come all the time. And then as we go forward, Officer McGee will train new ones that come in so they're informed and they know what to do in case of an emergency. We conducted our first ever unannounced lockdown drill this in December. We did notify parents that it was coming within 2 weeks. We felt it important that parents knew, but no one knew it was coming. I didn't know it was going to take place. I happened to be out of the building at a meeting that day, and they ran this. It went very, very well. But the one thing I'm still very, very concerned about is the side effects of doing these drills. There are, and they're unseen side effects. There are, I'm sure, kids that go home, they're worried, they see things on the news, and we just have to be very, very cautious how we proceed. That the experts tell me that we have to do these drills, and I do think we have to do these drills, but we have to realize that there are kids in our districts that we need to be very, very cautious with and careful and make exceptions so that we don't have problems on the other end that we didn't anticipate or we should have anticipated.
Do we do a form of debriefing? Do we talk to students after every drill?
We don't. We do it in turn. We do our own.
Right, but you don't talk to the students.
On the older grades, they do. In the older grades. In the younger grades, it's, and some teachers do, but that's something that I'll bring back. We have a meeting on Wednesday, so I'll bring that back to that meeting on Wednesday.
You need to talk about, I mean, if this.
I
there's
actually
so
shouldn't have
much around-
spoke. I just knew that some teachers did it. They may all do it, but I wasn't aware.
But that's just, that I think is huge, and that all plays back to mental health. And
Sure.
we need to make the kids feel like the school is a safe, stable environment to be in. So I think debriefing or something along that line would help them.
Do you know, did the arrangement with the cameras and control, is that part of the practice, or is that on a regular schedule to ensure the relationship with the police department is working the way we expect or hope?
Well, that's why we meet quarterly. So we have a meeting Wednesday with the police. We go over those details. We go over where we're on all these things. So that we also review the emergency response plan itself quarterly. So that's part of what we do.
And would have been part of the drill if it was required or if they wanted to do
It
that?
was. So For this one, for the next one, what they would like to do is a real big practice drill where you bring the buses back, you practice evacuating off the facility, you bring in the police, they block off the roads. Because we've never tested this system. So that's being discussed now. Because it's a complicated process.
I wonder if that's something, if it's really required, if all the schools are doing it, and if they aren't, what's unique here? But then B is it worth the cost of doing it on a Saturday, bringing in the staff and the buses, but not necessarily
Students,
over-drilling the kids?
Or-
'Cause
or
I
a-
agree, there's gotta be some sort of
Sure.
balance.
or a professional development day.
Okay, yeah. But
Um,
that'd be
They're gonna
good.
be there
I-
anyway.
You need to know if the system works from start to finish.
But moving,
nicer to
moving
find
the
it out
children,
now.
that's the biggest hurdle, but knowing what to do first, I think is the
Perhaps
route
if
that
you-
you leader.
Got
Yeah.
them in for an hour or two and then said, surprise, everybody gets to go home, see if, but, I just,
Just turn off the
it
wastewater.
just seems like there's clearly a balancing act.
I think there
with
needs,
how much drill.
to Kristen's point, though, I think you need to balance, you know,
It's out.
what's gonna happen with with some of the kids who aren't gonna handle this very well. You know,
Or the kids who seem to have handled it
Handled
very
well,
well and figured out in their own mind exactly what it means, and that's not exactly what it means to Jesus.
yeah, you know, I know there's a trade-off both ways, and I think it's better to err on the side of caution, but we just need to make sure that if we do proceed with this, that we do have something in place immediately after the drill for those kids that
It's
aren't
just-
handling it well, and,
Well,
and
let's understand what other schools, if this is something, as I say, that's happening regularly, what have they done?
why
Let's
we
not be
need to
the,
balance whether this is
weren't the
needed or not.
guinea pigs on parks, let's not be the guinea pigs on this island.
Absolutely.
And sorry, the last piece is, it's an extra day. I don't think it makes sense to use what little professional development time we have for this. I'd rather try to find the funds.
What I would, so I think you have a superintendent who errs very much on the side of caution, who errs very much on the side of try to prevent more issues. I'm not a big fan of the drills, although I know we have to do them. I'm very concerned about I can't even imagine growing up today and being a young parent and going through what's been going through, and then kids come home after a drill. I worry about all that. And so the reason why I said that to you is that's where I'm coming from. When we have this meeting with the chief of police, the school resource officer, the emergency response director, the town manager, the building inspector, the health inspector, all of our principals, that group, I believe, needs to be the group to make decisions like this, to be thoughtful, to look at what other districts are doing, and whether we're the first or the last or in between, I think we need to decide what is best for Sutton. And then I need to bring that back to this board and say, based on everything we've looked at, I recently, for this meeting coming up, I shared an article from the Boston Globe about this very issue, about the side effects of running drills. And it was more related to urban districts, but it applies here in Sutton as well. So we'll be very cautious, and we'll be very thoughtful about what is the best way to do this. And I wish I knew the answer. What is the best way?
The number of fire drills that are performed over the course of the year, that's sort of the fire chief's discretion, is that right?
No, it's state law.
It's state law how many are
Right.
performed. What's the state law on how many of these drills?
Yeah, they haven't caught up. There is no real guidelines as to what you do here. And, I mean, they've provided some guidelines, but not like it's mandatory. And the reality is the chance of this ever happening, that's the other thing we have to balance, is so remote. But that's what they said at these other communities. So that's what we're balancing. Mr. Mr. Schweitzer and Officer McGee have brought back the Rad Kids program in the elementary school, so that started. I think I mentioned this before. We brought the teen driving computer simulator at the school back in the fall, so that was really good. And the other thing that I think we have to look at, and it's really around when we do elections, the large elections, the every other year elections, whether that should become a professional development day as opposed to the October professional development day. You know, the off year, I don't think it's an issue. I think in the 2020 election, I think most or probably a majority of the districts are moving the October to that date, just for, if you're running, just because it just becomes too crazy around the school. So that's something we'll bring in the next calendar, not next year.
You can bust the teacups in New Hampshire to vote.
Yeah.
Sorry, I said that, didn't I?
And that's it. That's where we stand.
Any discussion? Next item? Yeah,
I was
Peter.
going to say one thing about, it's great, Officer McGee's been out earlier in the year and waving people around on I can only speak to the high school, middle school drop-off scene, but waving people to move around. And now there's a sign that says pull ahead to this spot. So
Yes, yeah, pull to
it's
the-
great,
yeah.
but still not everyone does it. So some people think the sign's there, so I'll pass all these other cars and, go around them. So some people are getting it, some people are not. I know there's a lot of probably permits driving in, so there's always the swap off, the parents hopping out of the passenger seat, but he probably should be out there again, just sporadically, just to remind people, pull forward, especially when it starts getting icy and,
I agree.
Now that it's nice and cold, he should be out there.
He was out there.
I
He was
really
out there. He was
agree.
out there quite a bit at the beginning, really hammering that you
Yeah.
need to pull forward. And so now that some people have it ingrained, they are pulling forward, but they're passing all the other cars with the kids getting in and out. And
Is there any way, speaking of that, to put a more permanent what it is, sign? I want to block the driveway, but the makeshift arrangement that we have,
it's definitely like an evolution.
doesn't, yeah.
It seems to get a
It,
little bit more complex every month.
I have heard comments from several people that the makeshift arrangement
I've also seen people go right around it.
is, yes.
Really?
And
While like a basketball game is
yeah.
letting out and everyone's coming out, people coming in that way.
it looks,
It's
yeah,
so scary.
looks
Yeah.
temporary. Sometimes it's confusing. Could there be a little more signage?
I guess it would be interesting to know if that's a safety issue, if that couldn't become a permanent change to the traffic
I mean,
pattern.
if the intent is never to have people take a left into that driveway, perhaps we need to use some of the parking funds to make some changes out that way so that you don't make a left. You can only make a right out of the driveway.
See, I mean, you could simply have a do not enter sign.
Are they gonna say
Very,
that?
very large.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
like
have when
right in the
going into,
middle
like,
of the
Douglas Ridge.
drive.
I'm just asking because
It's funny you say
I've
that
seen the
'cause
same thing that people have done, and I've had several people in the past week.
Increase the size of that sign, I don't know if you.
Yeah,
see
it's
it.
big now.
We-
It's
you know,
do not enter. It
all-
looks very
all the
official.
stanchions that we're gonna throw out,
Oh, yeah,
we
you,
painted that and put a huge, do not enter sign. That's in front of the barrier.
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
I like that. Thank you,
It's
Roger.
definitely bigger now.
Is that gonna cause you issues when it comes time to plow some snow?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Funny how that drifted. It was always
Yeah,
sort
you
of
could just
understood
plow
as
it up
one
there.
way, and then after the construction,
We're gonna forget it's there.
Ding, yep.
If you don't mind me just saying about signs, I mean, I know they're a necessity, but people just don't pay attention to
Uh-huh.
them.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
And we put them everywhere, we spend money on them. We got no, watch your dog, pick up after your dog.
Oh,
We got
that's,
no parking all the way down the entrance of the elementary, and you go over there and you see tire tracks all over the grass.
Yep.
And, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say, it's just.
no, they don't.
And the police say you gotta have them so then we can ticket them, but as far as I know, they haven't ticketed anybody.
Hey, can we
Well,
have
that's
that
the-
great
then
thing
that's
they
the
have
next
in
step.
parking garages? If you go over something, the little spikes come up, we can
Puncture
have that
pad.
coming out of the driveway. They might remember,
I think we're getting a little carried away here.
but it would work.
So,
All right.
we got set?
Not that problem.
I will tell you, everybody seems to notice Friendly Way. That sign.
That's where
is,
it's got the big spikes.
Thank you. Next item is the fiscal 19 budget update with Nancy.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
In your packet, you'll find the year-to-date budget from Munis, and there's just a couple things I wanted to point out. So if you go to page 41, for the custodian subs for the high school, it's showing that it's over budget by $540. In reality, it is not over budget. That's gonna be a reclass to the high school custodian account. On page 50, the facility contract services for the high school, this item is over budget by $222. And this was fuel for the generator that was not budgeted for. This money will be taken from the contract line from the other schools. And we did add this into the budget for next year. On page 52, under payments to tuitions to mass schools, this is over by $1,146, and that's for the Norfolk Aggie tuition for the special education students. It came in higher than we anticipated. And the last thing Mr. Raymond has already reviewed with you was on page 45 for the water treatment plant repair, and on page 51 for the overage in the elementary school repairs. And those are my updates for the year-to-date budget.
anything else you think that's getting close to, or that you're nervous is gonna go over?
No, I feel like we're in very good shape. Yeah.
Wastewater treatment plant. That's the only one that we're uptight, that we're
Said we
concerned
might have
about.
to replace it to the tune of $10,000 or $12,000.
Times,
A million.
Yeah. Did they ever, there was an assessment, well, they started to, through WPI, I think, for bringing water and sewerage in. Was that completed, or is that still in process?
I believe that was completed, and I believe that, they're looking right now to bring water and sewer up to the town hall in the first segment. And I think that's based on the WPI survey.
Because I mean, if the cost is $2 million to get it down to the school, and we're gonna spend $1 million
Yeah.
updating our wastewater treatment, it seems like it'd be,
And where's the largest concentration of citizens in this town? At the school, at any one time?
I do think it makes sense. I have no feel for how long a system of that nature, what the expected life is. It would be interesting to have a sense of, I don't know whether Whitewater or the original designs would say.
I was originally told that building was a 20-year-old building, a 20-year building.
The building, but when they say that building, it's all it is the treatment plant, right? The building lasts longer if you didn't pull the roof off but that's.
and 2000 sounds recent to me, but you look up and it's 2019, so.
Yeah, well, it was part of why I asked, but in, after thinking about it for 15 minutes, I really don't have any sense of whether that was meant to be a 15-year system or a 50-year system.
And do we have any contingency plans if something should drastically go wrong?
Um,
If
Well,
not,
what
then
you
we
would
need to-
have, we would have a major, major problem on our hands. What you would have is, you know, we've tested the well water and it's been able to maintain the gray water. So that's the first step. But you would be bringing in, you'd be trucking in water, you'd be trucking in and trucking out waste for a foreseeable future.
The good news is, because of the way the system is isolated, you could probably truck in non-potable water and not interfere with the systems, which would make it a heck of a lot cheaper.
That's recirculate the water back to the buildings.
Yeah.
There are two 8,000-gallon tanks out there.
Right.
I'm sorry, 4,000-gallon tanks out there, total of 8, that you could fill up, and that water doesn't have to be the purest of pure.
Right.
Because it gets chlorinated, it goes back into the building, but that could provide water to flush the toilets.
And what do we do for the outflow?
Then there are huge tanks that are buried in the grounds around the wastewater building, that separate the solids and allow the water, only the water that when to be refilled. Those can be pumped out when needed, and how much they can hold. I think they can probably, not being an expert, probably 3 to 4 days they could take storage up to, because I know when they drain them out, if they drain them too low, they have to wait like 3 to 4 days before the process starts refiltering the water inside the building.
Okay.
So there is some time that we can get away with, but you would constantly have trucks coming in and pumping out, and possibly bringing water in to put water back in the school if our wells aren't able to keep up. My fear with the wells is we've used them a couple times, actually, just a couple weeks ago. We ran it for a day and nobody really knew, other than you would see totally clear water in the toilets. It ran well, we didn't have any hiccups, but if something happens in the building, like flushometer gets stuck and it just constantly flushes water down.
You'll have no pressure.
Yeah, it takes the pressure out of the system pretty quickly, and we can't overcome that. It would take pretty much overnight to refill back up.
That's how we used to lose it, is the valves used to go more frequently and the toilet would run overnight.
Okay.
Surprise.
Well, it's not, you should really come up next time.
Yeah, I do it all over again?
No.
Next item is the final changes to the fiscal 2020 budget.
In your packet, you'll find an updated budget comparison to see where we currently are with the FY20 budget. At our last meeting, we had a budget gap of $237,000. Mr. Friend and I have gone through line by line, looked at the 3-year comparison, and we have made additional cuts, and we now have it down to $176,406.59.
I also sent out our packet to all of you today. Electronically, we didn't make you books. And we've put together our narrative, and obviously we have all the budget documents included. What we'd like to do is have you look at the narrative, but also have a subcommittee meeting for the budget subcommittee to sit down and go over our rationale of how we did the narrative. And have that presented at the January 28th meeting. And then between now and the FinCom meeting, what we have to work on is, if we want to fund all of these new positions, 2.5 new teaching positions and a curriculum director position, and it's going to be $160,000 more than we're already putting out of school choice. How sustainable is that? And can we make that sustainable over the next 3 to 5 years? And if we can, then I think we seriously have to consider moving forward, moving our school district forward, and using school choice a little bit more aggressively. But again, we have to have projections. What are some realistic projections of what the budget's going to look 3 or 4 years down the road? What will the revolvings look like? And there's a lot of balls in the air right now, because if you've listened to the governor and you've listened to the new Speaker of the House of the Senate, they are seriously looking at Chapter 70. They are seriously looking at increasing Chapter 70 funds. The problem for us is we won't know until June, maybe July, maybe June if they get going on this. But what does that mean for Sutton? So the biggest concern is always the large urban districts. We will have our state rep and our state senator coming in. They've moved it back to February, but they are going to come in. We'll talk to them about that. But at this point in time, I think looking at that school choice revolving, if we have close to $1 million at the end of the year in school choice revolving, I think we seriously need to consider spending some of that down to address curriculum, to address class size in the early learning center in elementary school, to have continuity in our school system. So again, who's on the budget subcommittee?
The presentation part of it?
Well, there's just one budget subcommittee, I think, that we do.
We decided for the budget, we would meet as a full committee and have it during a meeting. I don't know if we broke it out to a separate
No, I
presentation meeting like we did last year, because we thought we pretty much had a template down.
Well, by the way, the template is still the template. We didn't really, we shrunk it down a little bit. We kind of looked at what we did last year and put it down to, I think, 7 slides that really speak to the nuts and bolts of the issues.
I have less concern with the hearing, as we haven't really spoken, but certainly for FinCom, and to some degree for the hearing. I continue to believe it's very important that it's the committee, and the committee has been involved in it. I appreciate that you all are doing an enormous amount of work, but I do think it's important that we have an opportunity to not just understand it, but put a little bit of the thoughts and philosophies of the committee into it.
I think we should consider having a meeting on the 21st to review that before the public hearing.
21st is Martin Luther King, so it would have to be the Tuesday. I don't think Town Hall is open.
Or move it before that.
14th next
You
weekend?
could also do, I mean, you could do a working session. You could do a working session in my office as well. Could be in the conference room. So you could pick any day you'd really like to do.
So that just becomes a scheduling thing among the committee. That's the challenge there.
I know that week I'm traveling, so the week before would work on mine.
The 14th.
Next week,
14th,
yeah,
next week.
whether it's the end of the week or not. Is that
Week
Yeah.
14, I can try to find something
by the end, near the end of the week, would that work okay?
better than the beginning.
Thursday, Friday's not so good for me.
So Thursday, the
17th?
17th?
Does that work for you, Nate?
I think so. What time of day?
Yeah, that's, that's the snow day for the 5th grade, so that's fine for me.
In the morning?
Is there a,
Evening?
I can be flexible on mine, so,
I'm more open later in the day than in the middle of or morning.
I'm
It's,
good with that, but the later the better. The less I have to get out of work, the better. But
so we talking evening, almost like similar school committee meeting, just
Can we sneak in
6,
drops
7?
at like 6 o'clock or something like that in the evening?
Oh, yeah,
that's,
I'm gonna be there.
that
So
will
I'll be open,
work
yeah,
for
yeah.
me. Does that
Yeah,
work for?
yeah, that's fine.
yeah,
for you?
6 o'clock's probably good.
Okay.
Fine.
That's the, I mean, I could be there a little bit earlier, but
and you just have to post it. Right?
We will post it.
If it's turned into
It'll be a working session.
conference room, or
Sure.
The 17th.
presumably the school's ADA compliant.
So that's actually very good, because we really feel like we've kind of put a nice bow, but having some feedback prior would be great.
And good news is 10 days, we've got access to what you're thinking about. There's no reason why if somebody has a question, they can't give it to you in advance, which would make the
Yes.
conversation that much quicker.
Mhm. The biggest thing is, I think back, and we had so many slides the last time. And so we put the appendices, we kept the acronyms in there, and we put the student population in the appendices. But just, anyway, you'll see it if you haven't already looked at it. So, all right, great.
Next item is the
Thank you.
discussion for the 1920 school calendar.
1920?
19-20 school
Okay.
year. Yeah, the 1920.
It's a
So-
good year.
What we've provided for the committee is basically the current calendar that exists. And we just, the only changes comparing this year's calendar to next year's calendar is we've moved the November 8th half-day for parent conferences and things to October 24th. And the half-day for parent conferences in the Early Learning Center in elementary school from November 12th to November 7th. And that's what you're looking at here, so.
What was the
The reason for that was it's always during soccer playoff season, and they try to have parent conferences. We always butt up against soccer and volleyball and field hockey, and
So you got all the parents coming.
So all
at
the
same time as
parents-
all the athlete parents are there at the same time.
right, or they don't come because they're at an event and they
Oh,
don't
yeah.
show up for the event. So we're trying to accommodate that. That was the reason for that.
And procedurally, this is in the package, so if somebody wants to see the proposal, it's on the website. You can
We'll
get
put it on the front page of the website so people can look at it.
front page, but if-
Sure.
If you were watching and you wanted to see it right now, it was in the package. so
Correct.
you can see it.
And that's on the front page of the website as well.
And we'll vote on it roughly,
Probably the 4th, November, February 4th?
it's a ways out.
Sometimes goes out even further than that, sometimes even goes to March, but you know,
So folks have time to
sure.
say, but I wanted to ski.
You know,
One thing we gotta keep in mind is
We're waiting for
the
emails.
Wednesday,
Go ahead.
Christmas and New Year's really causes some chunkiness to the schedule when you get to December. And, you know, looking at this, there's 14 and a half days out of 31 that we're in school in December, and just because of the Wednesday holiday. I suppose that's good because of heating costs, but again, it just causes a difficult flow.
Yeah.
When you look at consistent, just, days of FaceTime with teachers, it's very heavy in the very beginning. When you look at September and October, there's a 27 and a half day stretch with no break, and then everything is the largest up is 20 and a half days in March. So, I mean, that's not even 3 weeks straight. It's,
But you know, in December, right, if you drop that half-day on Friday 20, you'd have 3 straight weeks, whether you really
Correct.
have their attention. So it's,
but still, if it wasn't, if the holiday was at the end of the week, you'd be able to.
25 on a Wednesday
others,
makes it a
yeah.
little bit tougher.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For sure.
Exactly.
But I do think it's, I hear you, the 31 days in December, on the other hand, they're pretty close to getting 3 out of the 4.
And the other one is in April, where you have, between Good Friday and the spring break, there's a week. That, you just have to keep in mind that we do have to work around those days. That's,
You know, I was a big proponent of having the 2 full weeks off at Christmas and New Year's. But this year when we came back, the 3 days we came back, it was actually very good. You know, it got the kids just, you know, back into the groove of being in school again. And so having those 2 days, I was a big proponent of not having those 2 days, but what I saw this week made a lot of sense. The kids they get back in the groove, they get 2 days under their belt, and they hit the ground going that next week on day one. They're used to getting up in the morning. They're, you know, if you don't have that, you know, high school kids and kids in general.
It's similar to the 2 days to start the school
Yeah.
year. They just kind of bring them back in slow.
I feel like the year that we made that decision for the 2 weeks, the calendar, I remember it was something weird, like one day in front and one day at the end, and it just didn't seem to make sense to open for that, but the feedback was quite negative. 2 weeks was a long time for people.
As a parent, it was brutal.
So I'm fully in favor of that, but I would like to see other options in February,
Now, if we could just get
like
One
maybe
week
the
in March.
19th, 20th,
1 week in March
21st.
and get rid of
that
February and
week in-
April,
yes.
that would be
That
fantastic.
would be great. I would take that.
Sounds good.
Why the half day on the 20th in December? Is it,
Ted?
Sorry.
Be
Okay.
present,
Why
please.
the half day on the 20th? The Friday before the vacation starts.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been in a school?
I didn't know whether there were,
It's
yeah.
it's
Not a
really
They can only wear their pajamas for half a day.
it's you got to have a half day somewhere, or you don't have to have a half day somewhere. But that last day is one of the longest days of your life. As a teacher, not so much for an administrator. I mean, it's not bad for me. But again, that's something that you guys should consider and think about. I go back and forth on that half day because it is the difference with this coming year is you then have the whole next week off. So whether we do a half day or not, I can tell you this: the staff really appreciates it because holding 8-year-olds and 7-year-olds and 12-year-olds focused on learning is difficult on that last day for a full day.
I would bet it's probably consistent in the valley too, that I think almost all school districts do the half day finish off.
I'm not so
No?
sure about that.
I would have expected it, but, all right.
I'd say it's in the valley's probably 50-50.
Is it any different than the last week of school?
Nope. Nope.
And where Christmas moves all the time, right, that 25th on Wednesday is sort of,
Yeah.
I get sometimes when you see the 25th on Monday or Tuesday, Friday feels easier. That really was the only one I looked at and I thought, boy, I bet that's a harder.
All right.
Next item is the third reading of policies, and these are policies on non-discrimination, the tobacco products on school premises, the equal employment opportunity, and the evaluation of support staff. A motion?
Make a motion to accept the changes to those 3 policies as stated and presented.
4 policies.
4.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That was exciting.
Next item is superintendent's update.
Thank you. So in the Simonian Center, the holiday concert K to grade 2 was fabulous. You know, it's funny, you have to have 2 sessions for kindergarten and grade 1 parents. Place is packed, wonderful. Can't believe it's already over. And then again, in first grade, they had an informative and celebratory Hanukkah celebration, which was one of our parents who come in and provide that. This is the second year this family has done that, providing the traditions, the background of Hanukkah. And they also bring in latkes for all the students to try. So that's a nice cultural event that happens in the Early Learning Center. In the Early Learning Center in the elementary school, we have a cultural council now as from the work of the district learning team. And they're a very active group. And so they're going to have an African cultural night brought by the Diversity Council on January 17th. So all parents will get information about that. The 5th grade band and chorus concert will be held on Wednesday, January 16th at 7 p.m. The snow day is the following day, January 17th. The middle school had a successful Glow in the Snow T&O on December 14th. Great shout out to Mr. Goyette and all the work he does with that group and all the staff and parents who help out. The band and chorus concert was obviously very well attended, very, very successful. And there's a new December newsletter out, and it's posted on the website if anybody's interested. As the students said earlier, the Haiti trip leaves, well, it's really sad, late Saturday night, but they fly out at 2 in the morning out of Logan. We've been looking at the forecast. Looks like they'll be fine getting out of Logan. I've met informally with a number of the students attending. They're very, very excited. It's really a challenge, though, because, I mean, they're going to a third world country. And so they're not bringing any carry-on bags because they're packing all of the supplies they're bringing down, all the peanut butter and jelly and all those things. So they have to cram all their clothes for a week into one carry-on bag. So a number of girls are struggling with that a little bit, but they're going to learn a lot of life lessons when they do this. That's for darn sure.
They have a specific thing on safety.
They do.
down there?
They do. They have
They're gonna have a guide too, somebody that's
a
with them the
guide.
whole
They have security guards.
Okay.
It's very well guarded, and it's I'm very, very, very pleased and very happy for them. I love
How many
these.
students are going?
It's an interest.
11?
I think it's a total of, I think it's 12 students and 2 chaperones. Mr. McCarthy and Michelle Donovan are going, our school nurse, so pretty excited. And then on January 31st, they're having the showcase night at the high school for 8th grade parents. Roger gave his update. You asked at the last meeting, I provided the capital plan for all of you and what my priorities would be. In speaking with Jim, we've made a couple of adjustments to they're going to fund everything in our capital plan. He's going to, let me take it back. The recommendation from the town manager is to fund everything we put in the capital plan next year. However, there is a change. We had put in to do the upper parking lot in the elementary school, remember that, so we could get bids on the sidewalk. A number of companies have come forward and said they would be willing to bid the sidewalk. So we've taken out the upper parking lot. But Jim has moved the chiller into next year. And so Jim is going to write the town's writing a green communities grant for the chiller.
So that was pulled forward?
So it was pulled forward. He's putting in the capital fund, he's putting in the capital plan, $150,000 for the chiller. And then writing a $100,000 green communities grant for that. They're also putting in, under the green community grant, the 2 hot water heaters for $40,000. And everything else is going to be recommended to be funded next year.
Wow.
So that was really
That's
good
great.
news. So that really keeps our facilities in great shape. As I said, the Vision Committee is going to meet on January 23rd. This will probably be an hour meeting. We wanted to bring everybody back together that was part of that to just go over what we had discussed and then provide an update on what we put into the budget, so that they can see that, and also the changes that we plan on implementing in the middle high school next year. In the Early Learning Center elementary school, it's mainly about hiring a couple of new teachers, 2.5 teachers, and also the curriculum director would also affect that. So that's what we plan on doing that night. And January 30th is the DLT meeting. And we've asked the principals to really do a better, to get out and recruit some more parents from the lower grades to attend those meetings. And that again is still on diversity in a way, so. And then finally, as I said earlier, on February 4th, Senator Fatman and Representative McKenna have put in their schedule to attend that meeting, so we can ask them questions about updates on Chapter 70 funding and education funding in general. And that's all I have.
Anybody have any new business or action items?
Maybe this falls under new business, but if there was a lot of discussion tonight, and is it in the plans to have a community discussion outside of the school committee in regards to the football piece? Because I really wish that happened before here, because we're going into the budget season, and I don't know in the next 2 or 3 meetings that we're gonna have a lot of capacity to have, back and forth and uncover a lot of details. I think that needs to be hashed out well before a school committee meeting. And you definitely hear there's some level of urgency on the timing of it. So I'm just concerned about trying to fit another session like that into the school committee meeting. I don't know how beneficial that's gonna be unless a separate meeting is set up outside of school committee to try to, I guess, get on top of more of this.
So, when we went down this path, when the school system went down the path to look at options, and for me, it's really about numbers. It really just, for me, it's very simple. It's numbers. That's all. It's not any of the other stuff. It's the number of kids who are participating. I said that 2 years ago. But when we thought about, when do you have a community meeting? We don't have an agreement with Millbury. So we looked and we said, how do we have a meeting with Millbury when we still have a cooperative agreement with Douglas and we don't have any of the facts? And so, you can give me guidance.
I'm just concerned about what's going around right now. It just seems like there's more of a fire than there should be. I'm feeling like there's a communication pathway that's not in place.
And I guess I'm more concerned is I don't know this is the best position to hash out.
I don't think this is.
It's a good forum to make a decision and hear input.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of details that need to be hashed out.
Agreed.
And I just feel like I'm hearing a lot of different information, and that's what
Agreed.
concerns me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the AD meeting with the president of the Friends of Sutton Football and come to some agreement where it's a joint. All these facts and figures are agreed upon by the two, and then we have a baseline. From my view, I don't see us as voting down football. We're just looking in the best interest for the next step for football, whether it's here or somewhere else. But I hear a lot of people coming at us saying we're trying to get rid of football, and I don't see us as getting rid of football. I see us as
We found out
trying to
that
find
we were
a
getting rid
best
of
solution.
football. Excuse me.
Yeah,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
We found out that football was endangered the same way everyone else did. It's not like we were part of a discussion on this, and I don't know that it is in danger. But knowing if there is a partnership with Millbury, what do their numbers look like? Who's coming through their system? They have a youth system.
I'm concerned that this is actually a continuation of
Yep.
an item
I'm
that
sorry.
we've already had,
Yeah.
right? If the notion was, can we bring this back up again, or I don't want to have it in a meeting, that's fine. But
I think what he wants to know if there's gonna be if there can be a community meeting.
Or some separate meeting so that more legwork can be done before we get to the next one, because I don't know that we're gonna have time in one evening if we go from
Somebody
here
else-
to the next meeting without any additional work
be
on
in
it.
bed by 8:30, but I still think it's the right forum if there are folks who are.
Yeah, but then do we need to have another meeting of this? Because we're going into budget season, and I don't see on the 28th to do a public session and have what we had tonight. I don't
But
know
we're
how
not
we do
able
that.
to answer some of the
Well,
questions
that's
that they.
part of it too, but I
they
do want to
have.
make sure they have the ability to give us input
Oh,
and
yeah.
state their
I
side of
agree,
it, absolutely.
I agree, but there are things we can't answer, and
Yeah.
I think it's reasonable for them to ask those questions.
So,
Earlier I asked
Yeah.
for I want more specific numbers.
Yeah,
I want a
agreed.
time frame of all of this so that the committee is fully up and everybody has the same piece of same pieces of information
Agreed.
to make the informed decision, because we're hearing different parts from different sides, and these don't agree, so I just want to make sure that everybody's got the same information
Yeah.
and the same time frame, and that way
We will
you'll be able-
provide you this week all of the numbers that we have, the historical numbers, the current numbers, the projected numbers next year, and they, on their side, have their projected numbers and what they project out is potentially happening. And so there's just a difference of opinion. So we'll provide that for the committee. You'll have that in plenty of time to digest. I have all the information now, where we weren't voting on it tonight. I didn't feel like this was an appropriate time when we don't have all our facts, and, I mean, we don't,
It would be great to have it even just for our own, we will be approached on this, just so we have some facts.
And please, with the numbers, please provide the sources of the numbers.
Yeah.
That's part of what we,
So
Does that-
I'm sorry, what I was just trying to bring up was how we handle this in the agenda or a separate meeting, an action item. I do realize we're some bit out of order in that I don't want to try to continue the discussion, even though that's happening, but more, what's the action item going from here for our planning for agenda going forward? Because I have concerns. I know how this goes every year with the budget season, and it will be very difficult to, give the appropriate attention to this and budget at the same time. That's what I worry about. So I just want to make sure we find a way to do that effectively, and we make the most of the time. And
so if I could make a recommendation, I'll send you all the information. I'll send it to all of you. Please do not respond all.
Yep.
Any of you have any specific questions for me, send me an email or call me. I'll provide you whatever information you have so you're fully informed prior to the meeting when a decision has to be made.
terrific.
thank you.
Anybody have any other agenda items or action items?
Gib is a bolt, wedge, or pin for holding part of a machine or structure in place. So an elevator gib, which holds the elevator doors in line as they go open and close, seems like a wear-on.
It was wearing out in our,
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
Anything else?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.